Every morning in offices and homes across the world, a sound repeats itself without anyone noticing it. The groan. The half-second pause before standing up. The slow unfold from a chair, hand pressed into the lower back. Spine cracking like a door hinge that hasn't been oiled in years. Nobody questions it. It's just what happens now. The way checking your phone first thing is what happens now. The way sitting for 8, 10, 12 hours is what happens now. The groan has become background noise, a tax we assume we owe for being alive past 30. And so the response is always the same. Stretch it out, reach for your toes, twist at your desk, foam roll until it hurts so good. Book a massage. Maybe even buy the $1,000 chair with the lumbar support that contours to your exact spine, because surely that will fix it. Here's the problem. None of that is actually addressing what's happening, and in some cases, it's making it worse. Because here's what almost nobody tells you. If you were put under general anesthesia right now, your stiff lower back would completely vanish. Every bit of tightness gone. Your spine would go fully loose, like a marionette with the strings cut. Not because the anesthesia stretched anything. Not because it strengthened anything, but because it switched something off. That single fact should stop you in your tracks. If your muscles were actually short, physically, structurally shortened from sitting, anesthesia wouldn't change that. A muscle doesn't suddenly get longer because you're unconscious, but stiffness disappears under anesthesia almost instantly, which means stiffness was never a structural problem in the first place. It was a decision, an active one. Your brain right now is spending energy, pumping electrical signals into your lower back muscles to hold them clamped down. Stiffness isn't something happening to you. It's something your nervous system is doing, on purpose, every second, like a hand gripping a steering wheel that won't let go. So the real question isn't, how do I stretch this out? It's, why would your brain choose to do this? What is it protecting you from? The answer comes down to a tiny network of sensors most people have never heard of, mechanoreceptors. They're scattered through your hips, your spine, your joints, constantly feeding your brain a live stream of information. Where you are in space, how you're moving, whether everything's stable. Think of it like a security system with motion sensors wired into every room of a house. As long as the sensors are picking up regular activity, the system stays calm, quiet, unlocked. But sit still for 2 hours, really still, barely shifting, especially in a chair that's so supportive it does all the stabilizing for you, and that data feed goes dead. The sensors stop reporting in, and from your brain's perspective, silence isn't relaxation. Silence looks like a malfunction. Or worse, like an injury, like your spine might be unstable, unsupported, vulnerable. So your brain does the only thing it knows how to do. When it senses instability, it locks things down. Hard. It's not malicious. It's not broken. It's actually trying to protect you, bracing your lower back the way you'd instinctively brace a sprained ankle. Except there's no sprain. Just hours of silence where movement data used to be. This is why the $1,000 ergonomic chair can quietly work against you. The better it supports your spine, the less your spine has to do anything, and the less it has to do, the less data it sends. Perfect support can mean a perfectly silent nervous system, which your brain reads as a 5-alarm fire. And this is also why aggressive stretching can backfire so badly. When you yank a muscle that's already locked down by your brain, your nervous system doesn't think, finally, relief. It thinks threat and triggers a reflex that clamps the muscle down even harder a few minutes later. You've probably felt this. You stretch, it feels great for 20 minutes, and then somehow you're tighter than before. That's not your imagination. That's your brain doubling down on the lockdown because you've confirmed its fear. So if stretching harder isn't the answer, and stronger muscles aren't the answer, because your muscles were never too weak to begin with, what actually works? The answer is almost embarrassingly small, tiny movements. So small they barely look like exercise at all. Movements designed not to build strength, but to quietly feed your brain the exact data it's been missing. To tell it, gently, I'm here, I'm moving, I'm safe, you can let go now. 3 of these movements, done for about 90 seconds, can interrupt that lockdown loop almost immediately. No stretching to the point of strain. No workout. Just small, deliberate signals sent to a nervous system that's been sitting in silence for too long. We'll walk through exactly what they are, how they work, and how to fit them into your day in the next part. But for now, the one thing worth sitting with is this. Your back was never broken. It was just waiting for a signal that never came. Picture the chair. Not just any chair, the good one. The one with lumbar support that adjusts to the curve of your spine, armrests that move in 4 directions, mesh that breathes, a headrest that cradles the back of your skull like it's been custom molded for you. It cost more than your first car payment, and it was supposed to be the solution. The ad practically promised it. Sit here, and your back problems disappear. And for the first 20 minutes, it does feel incredible. You sink in. Everything is held. Everything is supported. You don't have to think about your posture, because the chair is doing the thinking for you. That's exactly the problem. Because your spine isn't actually built to be held. It's built to move, constantly, in tiny, almost invisible ways. Even when you think you're sitting still, a healthy spine is making thousands of micro-adjustments every hour. Tiny shifts of weight, small rotations, little rises and falls as you breathe. These movements are so small you'd never notice them happening, but they're not random. They're information. Every one of those microshifts fires off a signal to your brain, a kind of constant whisper that says, here's where you are, here's what's happening, everything's accounted for. Now take all of that away. Give your spine a chair so supportive, so perfectly contoured, that it does all the stabilizing work for you. The armrests catch your arms before they drift. The lumbar support holds your curve in place before your muscles need to. The headrest means your neck doesn't have to make those tiny corrective movements it normally would. One by one, every source of that whispered information gets muted. And here's the part that catches people off guard. Your brain doesn't experience that as relaxation. It experiences it as silence, and silence, to a system whose entire job is to track where your body is in space, doesn't read as all good. It reads as we've lost the signal. Think about it like a security guard sitting in front of a wall of monitors. As long as those monitors are showing movement, people walking through hallways, doors opening, normal activity, the guard stays relaxed. But the moment every screen goes black at once, the guard doesn't think, oh good, nothing's happening. The guard thinks we've lost the feed. Something is wrong. Lock it down until we know more. That's what's happening in your lower back when you sink into the perfect chair for 2 hours straight. The data feed goes dark, and your nervous system, unable to confirm that everything is stable, does the only thing it knows how to do. It reaches for the parking brake. Now here's where most people get the story backwards. They assume that when they stand up and feel that awful bent-over stiffness, it means something has physically changed in their back. That 2 hours of sitting somehow shortened their muscles, or dried something out, or tightened a knot that's now sitting there like a stone. It feels that real. It feels like a physical, structural thing has happened to your tissue. But here's a fact that quietly destroys that entire theory. If you were put under general anesthesia right at that moment, fully unconscious, completely out, your lower back stiffness would vanish. Not loosen slightly, vanish. Your spine would go fully slack, your joints would move freely, and an examining doctor would find no resistance at all. Sit with that for a second. If the stiffness were a physical, structural thing, muscles that had genuinely shortened, tendons that had truly tightened, anesthesia wouldn't erase it. You can't make a muscle physically longer just by knocking someone unconscious. A rope that's been tied in a knot doesn't untie itself because the person holding it falls asleep. But that's exactly what happens with stiffness. The moment the brain goes offline, the stiffness goes with it. Which means the stiffness was never really in the muscle. It was being sent to the muscle, continuously, like a hand on a dimmer switch, except the switch was turned all the way up, and nobody told you it was happening. What you're actually feeling when your back is stiff is your brain actively running a program, sending a steady stream of electrical signals down into your lower back, telling those muscles to stay contracted, stay braced, stay locked. It's not a passive state. It's your muscles sitting there, tired and shortened. It's an active broadcast happening in real time, costing your body energy with every second it continues. So if it's a broadcast, a command, then the obvious question becomes, why is your brain sending it? What is it bracing against? This is where things get interesting, because your brain isn't just randomly deciding to clamp your back down for fun. It's responding to what it perceives as a threat. And to understand what that threat actually is, you have to understand how your brain experiences your spine in the first place. Not as bones and discs and ligaments, but as a constant stream of position reports. Every joint in your body, especially the small joints running up and down your spine, is loaded with tiny sensors whose entire job is to report movement and position back to your brain. When you twist slightly, bend forward an inch, shift your weight from one hip to the other. All of that gets picked up and relayed upward, building a live, constantly updating map of where your spine is and what it's doing. Your brain uses that map to answer one question over and over, dozens of times a second. Is the spine currently stable? As long as the map keeps updating, as long as those little position reports keep flowing in, the answer is yes. Stability confirmed. No action needed. Stay loose, stay relaxed, carry on. But stop moving. Really stop. The way you do when you're locked into a perfectly supportive chair, barely shifting for 2 straight hours, and that map stops updating. The reports stop coming in, and your brain is left staring at a frozen image, unable to confirm whether your spine is still stable or whether something has shifted without it knowing. From a survival standpoint, an unconfirmed spine is a dangerous spine. Your brain isn't going to gamble on probably fine. It treats the absence of information as a potential crisis, as if your spine might be unstable, unsupported, one wrong move away from injury. And when your brain perceives a threat to your spine, it has exactly one tool in its emergency kit: muscle guarding. It recruits the muscles around your lower back and tightens them down hard, creating a kind of internal brace. Not because anything is actually wrong, but because nothing has been confirmed as right, and your brain would rather overprotect than risk it. This is the moment everything clicks. Stiffness isn't damage, it isn't weakness, it isn't your body falling apart from sitting too much. It's your nervous system, faced with silence where information used to be, choosing to protect you from a threat that may not even exist, and holding that protective brace until something convinces it to stand down. Which brings us to the part almost everyone gets wrong next: the fix. If your back feels like a rusted hinge, the instinct is obvious: stretch it. Lean forward, reach for your toes, hold it for 30 seconds, breathe into it. It feels productive, it feels like you're working on it. And for a few minutes afterward, it might even feel like it's helping, looser, longer, like something released. But give it 20 minutes. For a huge number of people, that same stiffness creeps back, and sometimes it comes back worse than before. Not because the stretch didn't work, but because of what the stretch actually told your nervous system. Buried in your muscles is a built-in reflex, a kind of emergency safety mechanism whose job is to prevent a muscle from being pulled too far too fast. The moment a muscle senses rapid, forceful lengthening, exactly what happens when you aggressively reach for your toes on an already tight back, that reflex fires. The muscle contracts, hard and fast, as a protective reaction to what it interprets as a potential tear. Here's the part that makes everything fit together. Your brain is already on high alert. It was already bracing your lower back because it had lost confidence in your spine's stability. Now, on top of that, you go and yank on the very muscles it's been protectively clamping down, and that reflex fires on top of the existing guarding. To your nervous system, this isn't relief. This is confirmation. I was right to brace. Something just tried to pull this apart. And so, once the immediate stretch sensation fades, your brain doesn't relax the guarding, it reinforces it, often with more tension than was there to begin with. You walk away feeling like the stretch wore off, when really, it backfired. Your brain just doubled down on the lockdown because you gave it a reason to. So if pulling harder doesn't work, and the chair that does everything for you doesn't work, what does? The answer is almost laughably small. Not a stretch, not a workout. A movement so tiny it barely looks like anything at all, and that's exactly the point. Picture standing at your kitchen counter, feet hip-width apart, hands resting lightly on the edge. Now, instead of bending or twisting, imagine your pelvis as the face of a clock, with 12 o'clock at your belly button and 6 o'clock at your tailbone. Very gently, tilt your pelvis forward, toward 12, by about a centimeter, just a centimeter. Then tilt it back toward 6, the same tiny distance. That's it. Back and forth, an inch of motion at most, slow and unhurried. It feels almost too small to matter. There's no burn, no stretch sensation, nothing that feels like exercise. And that's exactly why it works. Remember the security guard staring at the dark monitors? This tiny tilt is like flipping one camera back on. It's such a small, low-stakes movement that it doesn't trigger any alarm, but it absolutely registers. Every micro tilt sends a fresh stream of position data from your pelvis and lower spine straight up to your brain, the exact kind of information that went dark while you were sitting still. Here's where the pelvis is. Here's what it's doing. Movement confirmed. Spine accounted for. You're not stretching anything. You're not forcing anything open. You're simply turning the data feed back on, gently, repeatedly until your brain has enough fresh information to stop assuming the worst. And because there's no force, no rapid lengthening, that protective stretch reflex never gets triggered. There's nothing for it to react to. This is the first piece of the puzzle, the smallest, gentlest signal you can send, and one of the most direct ways to start talking your nervous system down from the lockdown it's been running all morning. The pelvic tilt is the first signal, but your spine has another problem brewing underneath all that stiffness, one that has nothing to do with muscles at all and everything to do with the discs sitting between each vertebra. Think of each of those discs as a small sealed sponge. Inside, it's mostly water and a gel-like substance that gives your spine its cushioning and shock absorption. Like any sponge, it works on a simple principle. Squeeze it and fluid moves out. Release it and fluid gets drawn back in. That's how the disc stays hydrated, through alternating pressure over and over all day long. Here's the catch. Discs don't have their own blood supply. They can't just pull in fresh fluid and nutrients the way most tissue does. The only way they hydrate is through this pumping action. Compression and release, squeezing old fluid out and drawing new, nutrient-rich fluid back in. Now sit motionless in a chair for 2 hours. The disc gets compressed by your body weight and it just stays compressed. No release, no pump. The sponge stays squeezed, slowly losing fluid with nothing flowing back in to replace it. By the time you stand up, those discs are flatter, drier, and less able to do their job. And that loss of cushioning sends yet another signal to your brain that the spine isn't stable, adding fuel to the stiffness response that's already running. So the second movement isn't about position data this time, it's about restarting that pump. Stand the same way as before, feet planted, hands resting lightly on the counter. But instead of tilting forward and back, imagine drawing a tiny circle with your hips, so small it would be almost invisible to anyone watching. Shift slightly forward, then to the side, then back, then to the other side, tracing a slow, smooth loop, maybe an inch or two across at most. Not a hula dance, not a big swirl. A circle so small and so slow it feels like barely anything is happening. As your hips trace that tiny circle, your lumbar spine follows along, shifting compression from one side of each disc to the other in a smooth, continuous wave. One moment, the front of the disc is slightly more loaded. A moment later, it's the back, then the side. No single point stays compressed for long, and no point goes completely unloaded either. It's not stretching, it's redistributing pressure, the way you gently roll a sponge between your palms rather than squeezing it once and letting go. That redistribution is exactly what the disc needs. As pressure shifts across it in slow rolling waves, fluid gets nudged out of the compressed zones and drawn into the areas that just released. Old fluid moves out, fresh fluid moves in. The pump restarted after sitting idle for hours. And because the movement is slow and circular rather than sudden or forceful, there's no sharp signal, no spike that could be misread as instability. Just a smooth, continuous flow of information and fluid, exactly the kind of thing a calm, well-regulated spine produces on its own throughout the day. 2 movements down, one restoring position data, one restoring fluid flow. But there's a third player in this story, and it's been quietly working against your lower back this entire time without ever directly touching it. Reach down to the front of your hip, right where your thigh meets your torso, and you'll find the general area of a muscle most people have never thought about. A deep hip flexor that runs from your upper thigh bone all the way up to the front of your lower spine. Its job is to lift your leg toward your body every time you walk, climb stairs, or just lift your knee. When you sit, that muscle shortens. Constantly, for hours. Your hip is folded at roughly 90 degrees, and this muscle sits in a permanently shortened position, hour after hour, day after day. Over time, it doesn't just feel tight, it starts to behave as if shortened is its new normal length. And because one end of it attaches directly to your lower spine, a chronically shortened hip flexor doesn't just affect your hip. It quietly pulls on your lumbar spine from the front, like a rope slowly winching your lower back into an exaggerated curve. Your lower back muscles, the ones already on high alert from the stillness and the lost disc cushioning, now have an additional job, fighting against that constant forward pull just to keep your spine from being dragged into a bad position. So now you've got guarding from lost position data, guarding from disc compression, and on top of all that, a tug of war against a hip flexor that's been locked in a shortened position all morning. You can't fix this one by attacking the muscle directly. Pulling on a tight hip flexor runs into exactly the same stretch reflex problem we covered earlier. Pull on it hard and it fights back harder. But there's a back door. Your nervous system has a built-in rule. When one muscle group contracts, the muscle group that opposes it is automatically told to relax. It's wired in, automatic, no conscious effort required. Your body does it every time you bend your elbow or take a step. So instead of stretching the tight hip flexor, you do the opposite. You gently contract the muscle that opposes it, and your nervous system handles the rest. Standing at the counter, take a single small step forward with one foot, no more than an inch. Then, instead of leaning your body weight onto that foot, gently squeeze your glute on that same side, as if you're trying to draw your hip slightly forward and under you. It's a tiny contraction. You're not lunging, not stretching, barely even shifting your weight. Just a small, controlled squeeze of the muscle on the back of your hip. That small contraction sends a direct message to your nervous system. The back of hip muscle is now active, and by the built-in rule of opposing muscles, your nervous system automatically dials down the front of hip muscle, the one that's been shortened, and pulling on your spine all morning, without you ever having to stretch it, pull it, or fight it at all. It simply gets told to let go, because its opposing partner just switched on. 1 inch of motion, a gentle squeeze. And a muscle that's been quietly dragging on your lower spine for hours receives, for the first time all day, permission to release. 3 movements. A tilt the size of a coin, a circle smaller than your palm, a step shorter than your foot. If you're noticing a pattern here, you're not imagining it, and that pattern is actually the most important part of this entire approach. Every single one of these movements is designed to feel almost laughably easy, not challenging but doable, not a gentle stretch. Genuinely, almost suspiciously easy, to the point where you might catch yourself wondering if you're even doing it right, because it doesn't feel like anything is happening. That's not a flaw in the design. That's the entire design. Remember what we covered earlier. Your brain interprets effort as information. A big, forceful movement, a deep lunge, a hard stretch, a heavy lift gets read as significant. Significant movements get scrutinized. Your brain pays close attention to them, checks them against its model of what's safe, and if anything about them seems aggressive or sudden, it can trigger protective responses, including the very stretch reflex that backfires on you. But a tiny, low-effort movement doesn't trigger any of that scrutiny. It's too small to be flagged as a threat, too gentle to activate any protective reflexes, too understated to be anything other than background activity. And background activity is exactly the kind of thing your brain uses to build its map of safety. Quiet, ongoing, unremarkable data, accumulating in the background while you go about your day. So when these movements feel almost too easy to be doing anything, that's actually the clearest sign they're working exactly as intended. If you ever feel a stretch sensation, a strain, or any sense of effort during these, that's the cue to make the movement smaller, not bigger. Smaller is more effective here, not less. Now, here's how this actually fits into a normal day, because none of this requires setting aside time, changing clothes, or doing anything that looks remotely like a workout. Every 2 hours or so, whenever you'd naturally get up anyway, whether that's a coffee refill, a bathroom break, or just standing up to stretch your legs, take about 90 seconds at your desk or kitchen counter. Do 5 of the small pelvic tilts, rocking forward and back a centimeter at a time. Then 5 slow, tiny circles with your hips, tracing that small loop in both directions. Then on each side, take that single small step forward and gently squeeze the glute on that same side, 5 times per leg. That's the entire routine. No mat, no equipment, no special clothing, nothing that requires you to leave your desk or change out of work clothes. Just 90 seconds every couple of hours, woven into moments you'd already be standing up anyway. And here's what's been happening underneath all of this. The thread that ties every piece together. Your back was never broken. Not the morning you woke up stiff, not the afternoon you stood up from your desk, feeling like a rusted hinge, not any of the times you reached for a deeper stretch hoping it would finally fix something. What was actually happening, every single time, was a conversation, your nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do, protecting a spine it had lost confidence in, because the information it normally relies on had gone quiet. Stiffness wasn't your body failing. It was your body responding accurately to silence, and that changes everything about how you approach it. You don't need to fight your way through that stiffness with force, because force is the one thing guaranteed to confirm your brain's fears rather then calm them. What you need is communication. Small, quiet, low-stakes signals that restore the information your nervous system has been missing. A centimeter of tilt, a small circle, an inch of a step, each one on its own, almost nothing. Together, they're a conversation your spine has been waiting all day to have. Your body isn't broken. It never was. It's just been sitting in silence, waiting for someone to say something, and now you know exactly what to say.